post, and if you've been on Twitter and seen some of the first early pictures of what was going on inside the Capitol, it was courtesy of pictures from Igor Bobek. So, Igor, you were there in the first moments when this breach, it appears, occurred. Take me through the scene there when it all first started to happen.
Thanks, Chuck. Well, I was in the middle of reporting on today's certification vote for the 2020 election when I heard a commotion, I heard yelling, and I ran down to the first floor of the Senate where I encountered, I was stunned to encounter a group of protesters trying to make their way up the steps into the Senate, to the second floor of the Senate, and I saw this police officer courageously try to hold them off with nothing but a baton, but was ultimately unable to do so. And the protesters chased him up the steps where there was a sort of a standoff, and right steps away from the Senate floor. These protesters were carrying Confederate flags. They were yelling traitors. They were saying that, they needed to stop this from happening in order to make Trump president. Really just shocking scenes. At one point, a few of them got into the Senate chamber itself and got up to the day where Mike Pence was presiding minutes earlier to take photos and to scream that this was Donald Trump's election. Really stunning scene.
Igor, I'm seeing you caught some pictures. There clearly is some Capitol Police that was there at the time. Were they aggressively trying to push them back, or did they feel overwhelmed, or what could you observe at the time? How are the Capitol Police handling what they had? Were they just overwhelmed?
I think initially they were overwhelmed and unaware, frankly, some of them, that protesters had gotten into the Capitol. I took this video of this lone police officer trying to hold back this group of 15 to 20 protesters, and finally received the backup yelling that, they've gotten in. When he did receive backup, they tried to de-escalate the situation, tried to talk to them to calm them down, but ultimately they would not leave, and eventually roamed across the Capitol into the rotunda and into the Senate chamber itself.
Igor, are you safe? Where are you right now?
I am safe, thank you. I'm at a secure location. I'm outside the Capitol. I'm holding here, and we're all trying to see what comes next tonight.
Well, Igor Bobek, thanks for sharing your photos with the world, getting us these photos. There's a lot more we need to unpack with this. You stay safe, and of course, thank you for your brave reporting. Let me bring in Hakeem Jeffries. He's a member of the Democratic leadership, Democrat from New York. And Congressman, we got a report that you and Congresswoman Liz Cheney had been sort of reassuring the leadership and reassuring members that this process is going to go forward, that these terrorists are not going to stop, if you will, this process. Do you have an idea of when the Capitol is going to be safe for your return? Yeah, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, are you with us, sir? My understanding we have you on the phone. Can you hear us? There we go. Congressman. Okay. Well, let me check in here with Hallie Jackson and see what we're hearing inside this West Wing right now. Hallie, is anybody getting through to the president?
Well, I think the clearest evidence that at least the president did something, and there will be a lot of discussion of what that something was that taped message that we heard from him just within the last maybe hour or so. Clearly there had been people coalescing around the president. His allies were very public about this. Even some of his closest Republican allies very publicly on other networks, on Twitter, were saying, you have got to say something. Some of the most forceful comments came from the president's former communications director, a senior official inside the White House, inside the West Wing. Her name is Alyssa Farah. Chuck, her name might be familiar to Beltway insiders. She used to work for Mark Meadows, who then became the chief of staff. And she issued this sort of impassioned plea saying to MAGA country, I am one of you, and this is not okay. This has to stop. You have to go home. The president has to speak up about this. We obviously heard that statement from him that, said, sure, go home, but in the next breath said, we love you, you're special, I understand you're hurt, this election was stolen. It, of course, was not stolen. This is a crisis point for President Trump. He has now cleared the sort of bar of speaking publicly, right? The bar that was sort of set by his allies, by people like President-elect Joe Biden. But this is a president, Chuck, as you know, who is defiant as a personal defining characteristic and trait of his, right? And so what does he see? And importantly, Chuck, what is he hearing in the coverage of what he's seeing? This is a president who is at times and rather frequently influenced by some of what he hears in the media from, for example, media allies. And so that is something, you know, the president, he is very visual. He watches television. You know that's what he's doing now and how he's getting these images. We have, in our White House team, reaching out, obviously, working sources. What's he being briefed on? What's happening? We heard from the press secretary when the National Guard was activated. I think in the eyes of some critics, that took a little too long, right? We were watching these images for a while before it became clear that the National Guard would be going in. But now it seems like there's a little bit more action. There's a little bit more movement. But I have to tell you, it's getting dark in D.C. This is a point where law enforcement has to get a handle on what's happening here. And then there's a question of what the actual process is, Chuck. The whole process we were talking about, the Electoral College count, moving forward. How does that unfold? I've talked to another source on the Republican side whose hope was that some of these Republican senators, specifically, who had objections, would perhaps think twice before doing that and before pursuing that, given what we've seen unfold.
I would think that at least Mitch McConnell is going to attempt to have that conversation with Mr. Hawley and probably Mr. Cruz, among others. I think we have Vaughn Hilliard's connection now better for us. And Vaughn, Hallie just brought up an important point. The sun is setting. The sun essentially has set in Washington, D.C. Vaughn, what do you see out there, and do you feel the law enforcement presence yet?
Chuck, I think you just heard part of the law enforcement presence. There hasn't been a serious effort except for the last 15 minutes here. We are just a half hour away from the curfew here in Washington, D.C., and you can see some of the lights flashing up towards the Capitol. It was just about 15 minutes ago, Chuck, that the first tear gas was dispensed. You've seen flashbang grenades. Over the course of these last hours, what you saw were thousands of individuals as this insurrection took place here at the United States Capitol watching. You can see over to my left, our great photographer, Paul Rigney, is behind the camera here. And this is what you have seen here over the course of the last 15 minutes. It's a systematic push to push people away here from the scene. You saw Capitol Police work their way down and pick individuals up one at a time physically from their seats up on what is the inaugural platform. That platform is typically not there. It's just been constructed in the last weeks. That is where members of Congress, former presidents, members of the president's family sit during the swearing in of the president of the United States. This is where Joe Biden should be sworn in just 2 weeks from now. But what you have seen over the course of these last hours is thousands of people hold firm here at this very moment here. And now what you're seeing is tear gas and smoke being used to push people back. I got to tell you, Chuck, one gentleman just came up to me right before we went live to you. He said, if our voices are not heard today, you'll hear our muskets tomorrow. Again, there is no police presence outside of the Capitol Police that you see up literally on the steps of the Capitol. We've been here for hours. There is a medical emergency, and there is frankly nobody to turn to. There's questions of at what point does the National Guard come in, but literally the shot that you are seeing up on the United States Capitol is the extent of the police presence here at the heart of the United States. And it's been quite a sight to see. Again, we're just a half hour away.
So you have not seen...
You're from that curfew
Vaughn,
here, and you're seeing that first effort here from the police.
So you're not seeing any public police sort of where you're behind your cameraman right now. That is not there. They are not trying to disperse from there as well, or are you we see some, are we seeing riot gear? I think he may have caught something there.
You're seeing the push here from the police that have been dispersing that gas and the smoke there. You actually see that police line, I should say, as we're watching this in real time with you here, Chuck, pushing people down. Those are the steps. There it is. That's the walkway, I should say, from the United States Capitol down here to where you see essentially hit the National Mall that leads you over to the Washington Monument. And again, this is literally the first police presence that you have seen pushing people here away. I guess you could say there was maybe more than 10,000 people here earlier today, and it was the likes of Congressman Mo Brooks, Chuck, who literally took the mic at that rally that the president appeared at earlier and said, "Today is the day that patriots will begin taking names and kicking ass." And what you have seen here is essentially thousands be able to take over these grounds, and not until the sun went down, finally a pushback in an effort to disperse these individuals here on January 6th.
I'm noticing, I'll be honest, it's still sometimes, and I was watching this all day as well. We were on Capitol Hill. We've gotten a bit safer now, but there's not a lot of urgency, it feels. And it doesn't feel these protesters think that they have to leave anytime soon.
No, the ground was essentially ceded to them here. The streets of D.C. have been essentially all but quiet except for these protesters that have been walking about here. There was a sign that was up attached. You saw not only Trump 2020 hanging from the scaffolding here of the United States Capitol, but there was another sign off to the left, another from one of those structures that was built for Inauguration Day, in which it said, "We the people," and it said, "We will bring D.C. to its knees." And today they did. They stopped this process from going forward here. They essentially locked down the U.S. Senate. They locked down the U.S. House. And it was a law enforcement presence that was not prepared. And the question is, at what point will these I hate to use this language, but essentially this last stand be kiboshed here. Again, a half hour away, but you still have at least 1,000, 2,000 people up here on the west end of the U.S. Capitol that are holding firm. It's a matter of what does this next half hour look like, and what does the Washington, D.C. look like tonight and also tomorrow.
The curfew, you keep referencing it, 27 minutes is when the curfew hits. Vaughn, stick around. We want to keep your shout out. Pete Williams, I want to bring him back. Pete, you've got a better idea of what we've seen some pictures. They clearly are trying to do some disbursement. We know that there is an FBI SWAT team in the Capitol. What is happening right now that we don't see?
And a National Guard movement on the way should be arriving there shortly, we're told, and then they'll coordinate and begin to push people out, do a final clear of the building and get them off the ground. That's the overall plan. Meantime, Chuck, back inside the Capitol, I just talked to a member of the Senate leadership who said that they haven't decided yet whether they will try to do this. First of all, they are determined to continue the count tonight. They want to keep going. They're defiant. They want to make the point that they can't be stopped. The only question is whether they do it in the secure location, which is outside the Capitol building, but on the Capitol grounds where they are now, or most of them are. The leadership is in a separate place. That's McConnell, Schumer, and Chuck Grassley, who's the president pro tem, as well, we believe, as the vice president, who we think is still up on the Capitol grounds. The question is whether they would do it in their secure locations, or would they try to go back to the House floor or back to the Senate floor. So that's question one. Question two is, when they resume, what are they going to do? They have to finish and vote on the objection to the Arizona ballots. That was what caused them to go their separate chambers in the first place. I'm told that the objecting senators are now meeting and deciding whether to simply say, okay, that was enough, we made our point, or whether they also want to object to the votes from other states when this continues. But the mood that I got from this member of the leadership reflecting what this person said was the view of all 97 senators who were there is, we're not leaving till we finish.
And so do we have a sense, and do you have a sense from your law enforcement sources, when do they think they could get operational control inside the Capitol?
I don't think they have any idea, because they have to make sure it's clear. They have to sweep it for potential explosive devices. And that's not just, being prudent. There were a number of explosive devices or potential explosive devices found outside the building on the Capitol grounds today. I just don't know how many. But more than one or two, I'm I'm told. And whether they were all working or not, I don't know, but they're taking no chances. So, you know, that would take a while. They don't know how long that would take, and that's why they haven't decided whether they'll just try to pick it up where they are. They've all been fed. They're safe. The mood is generally good but defiant. And so they're waiting, I think, trying to get a read about how long it would take. I don't think anybody knows how long it would take to get the Senate back in shape for them to go back.
Right. And have they thought about, you said that they were thinking about they might do it in their secure location.
Right.
I assume they would want to publicly record that in some way. Is that something they've thought about, how to sort of make sure it's in the public record, I guess?
Yeah, I wondered about that too, because I think they haven't gotten around to that, is the sense I got. I mean, obviously when they're in the Senate and House floor, we have the facilities to be able to hear and see what they're doing. I suspect they don't want to do this in secret. They want it to be, they want to show that they're doing the work. And I think that's one of the reasons why they thought about wanting to go back to the Senate chamber.
Yeah, Pete Williams with an important update there, and noting that it is a defiant group of United States senators, at least that want to get this done, and that maybe the objectors are going to talk about standing down. We shall see. Let me go back to Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, we're seeing more live shots there. It definitely looks like there. I think I know that guard gate where those stairs are. Looks like finally a police presence is taking at least some control of some part of the Capitol.
Chuck, what you're seeing here is the police line here that pushed people away here. Finally, you're dealing with about a final 1,000 or 2 here right before us here. I'm going to have Paul just turn around here if we couldn't just get a shot of the U.S. Capitol. Yep, and they're asking us to move out, Chuck, and we will. You can see where the U.S. Capitol was, and you see this is Metropolitan Police Department here.
Yep.
Just a half hour until that curfew, finally pushing people back here. And again, though, there's still about 1,000 or 2,000 people up near that scaffolding of the inauguration platform that still are there. As to how those individuals are going to be pushed back, I'm not sure. But what you're seeing here is those Metropolitan Police Department going back and systematically pushing people back here, Chuck.
Are you seeing, how uncooperative are some of these protesters being, or are they starting to listen to the police?
When you use tear gas and flash grenades and pepper spray, it forces one to become a little bit more, or a little less resistant here. But again, I just got to put in context here, there was at least, I think there was at least a 10,000 or plus outside here earlier here when there was essentially no police operation to be seen. But then what you see now is maybe 1,000, 2,000 people here for sort of this final last stand as the police department pushes people back.